Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the latest economic reports which show that we'll be set for the lowest growth and highest inflation in the G7 for the medium term at least. The combination of these two things can only mean one thing. We're going to see a significant fall in the standard of living, and millions of people are not even going to be able to afford that. Brexit is absolutely crushing us into the ground. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So in terms of the headline figures, the UK is expected to have the highest inflation in the G7 until 2024 at least. This is more even than the United States, and I know American economists are deeply worried about their own plight. You can see from a chart in the Financial Times that inflation is forecast to be lower next year than this year and lower still in 2024. The Tories and their client media will no doubt hail this as a masterstroke of economic management, even though in each of the 3 years the inflation is expected to be higher than the target 2% set for the Bank of England. It will also be higher than every other G7 nation in each of the 3 years being looked at. Were it not for the US having a rough outlook, we could even say significantly higher than other G7 nations. Of course, when it comes to inflation, we know that we're talking about a standard basket of goods and services. An individual person's inflation can be higher or lower than this. The next chart does not bring much comfort. The UK is experiencing the highest energy inflation in the G7 as well. Well, we can't do without that. In fact, when it comes to the increase in the cost of various goods and services, the ones I tend to focus on would be accommodation, energy, fuel and food, because everyone's outgoings will have to cover those expenses. You may not think everyone is sensitive to an increase in fuel prices. You would be wrong. Because obviously, people who need to drive to work are going to be feeling the pinch badly. Fuel price has gone up again now. It's now officially the case that the average price means that for an average family saloon, it's £100 to fill up. But even if you use public transport, those fuel prices will eventually be passed on in the form of an increase in the ticket price. And when ticket prices go up for private companies, they tend to sneak in an extra amount in the form of a bit of extra sneaky profit while they're at it. But even if you walk or cycle to work, or you don't work at all, retired say, you're still paying for the extra fuel, because food needs delivering throughout the supply chain, and higher transport costs eventually have to be reflected in prices at the till. If our high inflation was largely down to things that people in this country buy, but we can do without, then it would be less of a worry. At least those on the tightest budgets would be able to cope. But we're talking about things that we simply struggle to do without. Like I said before, inflation is only half the story. You can actually manage higher inflation if you are experiencing the growth in incomes to deal with it. Simple enough, we're about to hit 10% inflation this year. But if we're making 10% more money, well, it all evens out and we can carry on with the same standard of living. Not many people are taking home 10% more this year than last. Growth is stagnant, as it has been for some time now. Growth is also forecast to be zero next year. And never mind the G7, this is nearly the lowest in the G20. Only Russia is expected to be worse off than we are, and the reasons for that are fairly obvious. Of course, the reason for the UK's lack of growth should be obvious as well. It's really this simple. To achieve growth, your businesses have to sell more to others. Brexit means we can't do this. And it doesn't matter how much people want to bury their head in the sand and insist that it's not inevitable, it is. We have made it harder to export our goods and services. That's a fact. There are some goods we can't export at all. There are some that we can only export in limited quantities. There are some where you need to do the opposite and sell in bulk. Produce like cheese, very famously, needs health certificates to be exported. The Cheshire Cheese Company was explaining last year. These cost a lot of money. It's only worth exporting the cheese if it's whole pallets worth. So it's not possible to export small consignments to individual domestic customers anymore. There may be import duties applicable to the goods, which will put customers off buying from British suppliers in future. There are costs associated with the paperwork required to export your goods. The paperwork isn't always the same for each individual country because they've got their own rules and systems, sovereign countries and all that. The standardised EU systems are only for the single market and what weak deal we have with the single market. They're of less use for third countries. The goods need transporting on lorries by and large. We're struggling to get them through our hard Brexit border. So there are delays which make British suppliers less reliable. We may also struggle to get non-British lorry drivers to actually do these runs if the mess continues. And that's just goods. We're a service-based economy, really. Services were screwed even harder. It's now no simple matter to deliver services in the EU. We can't just hop across and carry out a performance or set up an exhibition or even just go to provide some training. Paperwork is required in advance, and here the differences between different EU countries has a massive impact. Because we've got a deal for goods, which helps a little, but we've got nothing really to cover trade in services. So even for our own domestic production, we can't get the workers right now. We shut ourselves off from the continental-wide labour market. So even where we can still export competitively, can't always meet production needs. Boris Johnson has just declared that boosting our economic growth is his top priority. He says he has a plan for investments in infrastructure, skills and technology as well. Problem is that we've heard it all before. He said he had a plan for all these things in 2019. Where is it? It's more promises of jam tomorrow. But you note the plan. Investing in infrastructure, skills and technology. I say plan, like I keep saying. Boris Johnson doesn't know the difference between an outcome and a plan. He says what he wants to achieve and he calls it a plan. It's not a plan if you don't say how you're going to get there. But what he calls a plan. And these things are vital for our future. Infrastructure, skills, technology, of course they are. But they don't provide an immediate return even if you had a plan to achieve them. So Johnson's plan is to just keep promising this jam tomorrow. Can't have it today because this sort of investment takes time. Never mind the fact that he won't invest in infrastructure, skills or technology at all. The Tories have spent the last 12 years removing funding in all of these areas. And Johnson has been no different in his 3 years in power. I imagine this is all Theresa May and David Cameron. What's he done in his 3 years? What investment has he committed to in all that time? None at all. He didn't even invest in our systems to protect us against current and future pandemics. He pissed away all the money on short-term private company profits. He didn't invest in the NHS so that we'd not only deal with the pandemic now, but also a future pandemic. We've got nothing to show for all that money now. Nothing to help us for the next pandemic or even the current one. We should have used that money to build up the NHS. We didn't. If we assume that the Tories do not call a snap general election, we have 2.5 more years of high inflation and low growth. Johnson or whoever replaces him will go for the tried and trusted tactic of saying that, things are tough, but it's not our fault. But they've been doing the hard work behind the scenes and we're about to see the rewards. That's what they'll say. The problem is that this reward is just the other side of the election. Oh yeah, it's all going to come together. It's all coming together, this plan of ours. You're going to be on easy street. When are we going to be on easy street then? About towards the end of 2025. Don't we have to have an election by the start of 2025 at least? Yeah, this is the problem. You're going to have to vote for us one last time to see it. And why is Johnson saying he's making growth his top priority? Because he's facing calls to cut taxes. Like that does anything to help. I already said earlier this week, someone on the median UK income would gain less than £200 a year from the proposed tax cut. That doesn't help deal with the extra cost of having a Tory government, does it? It also doesn't counter all the tax rises they've put in place. So the actual tax cut is still not even a net tax cut that they're talking about. It's a net loss. But people don't think like that. They don't think the tax cut is against the money. It's like tax cuts, money saved. They don't weigh it up against the money it's costing them. Doesn't matter if they paid more tax and we had a proper public services and the overall cost of living would come down. People don't think about that. It's like, well, you might pay more taxes under a better government, but you'll pay less in like fuel and food, and you'll pay less for services like prescriptions and train tickets and water, electricity, gas. People don't think it like that. And the Tory client media are not going to point it out to them. But there's going to be no significant growth because we keep inflicting these trade sanctions on ourselves. And bear in mind that the growth forecast, zero growth next year, that growth forecast is not taking into account the prospect of the Tories starting a trade war next year with the EU, maybe even the US if they get it badly wrong. They probably think that when it comes to it, they're not actually that insane. Now, for what it's worth, I don't think they're that insane either. But I'm not entirely sure. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.